What's going on, everyone? It is the Derf. Act 3 is on the horizon, basically a week away. So in the meantime, we're going to start putting together a few fun builds that you can take into virtually almost every activity. And this one is no slouch. This is a Prismatic Warlock build centered around Barrow Dyad. It also is going to have nothing but Nether arena weapons. Yes, an entire build focused around the new seasonal weapons. Some things that people are fully aware of, maybe some things people are not aware of. We're going to be taking advantage of one of the fan favorite Warlock exotic armor pieces to pair with this. And once we add all together with the artifact, we're going to be generating our abilities extremely quickly. We're going to be amplified. We're going to generate a ton of orbs of power. We're going to get our super back extremely quickly. All good things. So if you guys have been looking for a great Warlock build that is also extremely fun and takes advantage of all these weapons, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get on into it.
Yeah, boy!
So for our Prismatic Warlock build, we are going to be running Song of Flame. Virtually any super that you want to run is perfectly fine with this build. I prefer Song of Flame because with one of our fragments, every orb that you pick up is going to grant you restoration. And of course, restoration cannot be interrupted, which is going to be key here since we are not running one of the more popular Warlock aspects, which we'll get to here in a second. But you can run what you please. Nova Bomb can be popular here, certainly Storm Trance, and Needle Storm if you prefer to spec into more Threadling type build. For the abilities, we've got the Healing Rift, Burst Glide, Arcane Needle, since we can stack it up to 3 times, and we are required to run the Storm Grenade, but we're not going to be using it like a normal grenade. We're actually going to be consuming it. So once I get to the armor, we'll be going over that more. For our aspects, we're going to be relying heavily on Lightning Surge. While sliding, activate your charge melee ability to blink forward, calling down lightning strikes that jolt targets as you materialize. Targets that are hit by your lightning strikes grant you stacks of bolt charge. This is going to do 2 things for us. It's going to jolt these targets, and jolt damage causes overload champions to be stunned. So even though this is off the beaten path as far as a Warlock class is concerned, we are still going to be able to handle at least 2 champs at any given time, but we're going to make sure we can handle all 3 here with our fragments. Second aspect is going to be Bleak Watcher. Now, when we consume our Arc Grenade, we are going to also spawn on top of our Arc Soul, our Sentient Soul. We're also going to spawn a Bleak Watcher turret. Once it is spawned, it fires slowing projectiles at nearby targets. If you've ever messed around with this aspect before, then you know when it comes time to bosses, or when it comes time to face bosses, I should say, this can slow a boss down. And if there are not many adds in the area, it will stay focused on the boss the entire duration so long as it has a clean line of sight. So when you couple that with the fact that it can stun overloads, it can slow any enemy, including bosses and mini bosses, your Bleak Watcher turret suddenly becomes your best friend. And since we're going to be maining a strand weapon for our basic ad clear, we're going to virtually have unlimited grenade regeneration ability. For our fragments, Facet of Purpose is numero uno on the list. Restoration, you regenerate health and shields over time, cannot be interrupted by taking damage. This is going to help us in place of Feed the Void. Feed the Void, of course, can be substituted into this build if you are extremely concerned about getting more grenade and more health back. However, restoration is going to be able to give us at least our health back as well as our shields, which shields, by the way, do not regenerate with Feed the Void. It is only health. Fast of Awakening, rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or super final blows, generates an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. Take your +10 to resilience. You're going to be spawning tangles and ionic traces with this build. A bolt of pure arc energy that travels along the ground seeking towards its creator. When picked up, ionic traces grant ability energy. So we're going to be generating an extremely high amount of ability energy by using arc weapons. And of course, having tangles spawn periodically is a great way to do some extra tick damage, pick them up and throw them, or shoot them from a distance to deal area damage. We've got Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. This is going to be key since we're going to be using arc damage a lot. And rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. Our main add clear weapon, our main weapon that we're going to be running around with primarily is going to be, of course, Barrow Dyad. So we're not going to have any shortage of grenade energy coming back to us simply because we're running a strand weapon. Facet of Sacrifice. While you have an Arc Solar or Void buff, ability Final Blows grant bonus darkness transcendence energy. This might seem redundant since we have a strand weapon as our main add clear. However, because of the tick damage we're going to be able to do with our 2 arc weapons I'm going to go over here when we go over the weapons, we're still going to be generating an obscene amount of light transcendence energy. So it's important to take advantage of the fact we're going to be virtually always amplified to get bonus darkness transcendence energy on top of the light energy that we're going to be generating just by being ourselves. Facet of Protection is number 5 on the list. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. While transcendent, the effect is increased. Because this is going to be kind of a melee heavy spam / strand heavy spam / arc heavy spam, we're going to be constantly surrounded by enemies with this playstyle. This playstyle plays more aggressively until you get into harder content. This build will still work in harder content, but if you do end up taking it into that, you just want to be mindful of champs, which of course we'll go over, but having Facet of Protection as a damage resistance is certainly always welcome. Last but certainly not least fragment is Facet of Dawn. Powered melee hits against targets makes you radiant. Power melee final blows make you and nearby allies radiant. I don't like the -10 to strength on this, but that's okay. I'll take the -10 for the fact that anytime that I call down my lightning surge, I can become radiant for a few seconds. And while I'm radiant, that means I can pierce the barrier bubbles. So the other thing that you can do is you can pierce those bubbles that some of the Taken spawn around them. I'm thinking like some of the beefier Taken enemies, they will spawn like a dark bubble around them. They're not barrier champs or anything like that. They're just more powerful enemies. When you are radiant, you can actually shoot through those with any weapon you have. And since we're going to be proccing radiant and hopefully we'll have our unraveling rounds going at the same time, we will be able to shoot right through them. For our stat distribution, you want to focus on resilience and then equally on discipline and strength. It just so happened that I fell on T8s for both discipline and strength, 81 specifically. I didn't plan it like that. That's just kind of how it went. You want to be at least at a T4 in your recovery and your intellect. The reason you want your intellect to be somewhere in the middle, right there, T4, T5, T6, somewhere in there. Heck, if you can get even higher, all the more power to you, is because Song of Flame did not receive the buff for the roaming supers for the ability regen. We do have a fix for this, which is going to be off the beaten path for our armor. So I'm going to go over that, but you're going to get bonus super energy back simply by using your abilities in the first place. But you want to be able to get your class ability back as fast as possible. And when you pick up your orbs of power, you want them to be able to get you your abilities back in general as fast as possible. With the grenade with your discipline and your strength at an 8, I would say minimum at a 7 if you can help it. You should be getting your melees back roughly every 40 seconds if you're literally doing nothing. But more realistically, you should be getting them back about every 20 to 25 seconds, both of them, if you're picking up your orbs of power and you're cycling through your abilities. But if you had to pick one over the other of what you want to generate more of, I would focus on discipline, get that to the 8, and let your strength dip to 7. If you're dipping all the way down to 6, you may want to go to failsafe and farm for a little bit better roll. With this style Warlock, you want to have resilience, discipline, and strength as your high point stat distribution armors. For our weapons, I'm going to go through the 3 that I have, why they work, and a couple of mods that you may or may not know exist. But let's talk about Barrow Dyad. With Act 3 on the horizon, if you haven't been grinding for the catalysts yet, it is high time to make sure you get over to the slab so you can get more than your high impact reserves refit. I am currently in the process of grinding for it, but that doesn't really take away from the potency of this weapon. The high impact reserves, the end of magazine damage that's done is very noticeable, so it's not like you're going to be missing out. And paired with the artifact, you're of course going to be spawning your unraveling rounds and threadlings periodically. So if you haven't messed around with Barrow Dyad, make sure that you have it set to the Taken Divergence that says Blight generated increases the longer this weapon remains on target. Blighted seekers burrow into targets and explode. The reason this is important is it doesn't matter if you hit one target or a bunch of targets. Having your weapon hit targets in general will generate said blight. Do not have it on the other one, which you can flip-flop between right next to the slab in Eris' apartment. Don't have it set on the one where you have to hit multiple enemies to generate the blight, because it takes longer to proc the extra damage. Psychopomp makes an appearance here in this build. Now, even though this is more of a fun, off the beaten path build, there are a couple of things that will make this almost an endgame ready build. First is going to be Rolling Storm. If you don't have a Psychopomp with Rolling Storm, get out there and go get one. It is 100% worth the grind. But honestly, you don't have to grind that hard. I think one run of Nether with a focus on your tome for grenade launchers should hopefully net you one that's got Rolling Storm. That's the key one here. Ambitious Assassin is also a great one to have here, because if you get multiple kills with your area denial frame grenade launcher, you will then reload with 2 rounds in the magazine, which means you can put out more area tick damage with less effort. One of the mods that you want to try to have on here, if you are going to be taking this into a Nightfall and or a harder content activity, Power of Ambition. If you look down here on the mods, if you scroll over here, you've got to progress the slab in Eris' apartment. If you have not progressed it, you will not be able to access this Power of Ambition. Rapid hits with this weapon grant blight rounds, dealing damage over time to targets hit by this weapon. Strong against overload champions. So you read that right. This weapon can stun overloads if you needed to. So I have this on here as simply just a show of force, I guess, so you can say that this weapon can now be used in Lost Sectors, Nightfalls, things where you're going to be seeing overload champions. So if you thought that you couldn't use your new favorite grenade launcher, that is also Arc, and takes advantage of the artifact very well, now you have one additional reason. To complement that, we're going to be running Watchful Eye. Now, there's a bunch of different roles that you could accept as higher tier roles. Field Prep is a nice one for me, because when I'm firing this, typically I'm firing it at a boss, and it's not that hard to crouch to get your increased reload speed. I'll take that over having 120 rounds in the magazine, simply because I've got the jolting feedback anyways, and this one happened to roll with Arrowhead Break. Now, on the mods, here we go again. Power of Resolve. You got to scroll the second page. Here it is right here. Rapid hits with this weapon emit a Taken Seeker projectile, strong against unstoppable champions. Now, intrinsically, jolting feedback does stun overload champions. However, with this Power of Resolve, now you can stun unstoppable champions and overloads with this weapon by itself, which means if you are going into an activity that you have to be conscious of barrier champs, you may want to put on a barrier weapon, or just make sure you have Facet of Dawn on so that you can proc Radiant when that barrier champ appears, if you're going to be going against all 3 champs. But this kills two birds with 1 stone. Having this on, I understand you could put backup mag on. If you're not going to be worried about the unstoppable champs, then you don't really have to worry about this altogether. I'm more just showing that this exists. So your new favorite machine gun, because it's one of my new favorite machine guns, if not one of my top 3 currently in my arsenal for builds that I'm running or at least experimenting with, hopefully now this is another reason why you should farm for this. For substitutes, you can also put on a Watchful Eye with eddy current jolting feedback, or you can put it on, there's another role. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Whoops. I'm blanking off the top of my head of what that role is, so I apologize. I was thinking I was going to have the overflow and jolting feedback, of course. Okay, so now that little hiccup is behind us. Yeah, eddy current, jolting feedback, field prep, jolting feedback, and overflow and jolting feedback would be the top 3 combinations you want with this. If you can get an arrowhead break on it so you can bump it up to over 80 recoil, it'll make it that much sweeter to do. But as you can see on that one, I've got 74. I just got that, so that's why I have 0 kills. But the other one, I've definitely been using more. If you do want to be conscious of the barrier champs, you can always put on Division. It's a heavy burst. It rolls with it. There's a number of rolls. I like Grave Robber and Surrounded because typically speaking, I'm going to be using my melee a lot. So the Grave Robber and the Surrounded is going to make a lot of sense to me because I'm not firing this from a distance anyways. You can put on the alloy mag. You're not really hurting. 325 rounds per minute at 24 in the magazine is really not going to slow you down much. But really anything that you can use to help you pierce the barrier champ is going to be good. And oh, by the way, if that wasn't enough, you can also put on Power of Ambition, which of course will stun overload champions. So you can stun barriers and you can stun overload champions with this sidearm. It is the only sidearm that can theoretically do that without having jolting feedback attached to it. So just something to think about. Again, this is more off the beaten path. If you haven't figured that out, I'm trying to focus on the Nether weapons in general, but you could still theoretically take this into an endgame type activity. You might just have to be conscious of, your ammo and of course how you're using all these weapons. You can't just go in guns blazing, but that is just the same as any GM or Master Sector. I probably wouldn't recommend this for a Master Sector. There's certainly other options out there. I'm thinking Stronghold Titan, Arc Warlock, Void Warlock, things like that. But I guess if you take your time, theoretically, in the right hands, this could be used in virtually any activity, period. For the helmet, it's going to look a little bit different than what I normally have. In this column, you can put on whatever general mod that you want, but I would recommend putting it down to just a +5 mod, which is only 1 energy cost. The reason for that is we're going to be running hands-on as well as a strand siphon and an arc siphon. Unfortunately, you're going to use 9 energy with this build, but the important thing to note here is since we're going to be using Barrow Dyad and we're going to be primarily running in the Nether and possibly basic Nightfalls, maybe Dares of Eternity, it just kind of depends on, the user. Ordinarily, I would have a heavy ammo finder on here, but I want my super bag a little bit more often. The reason for that is if you play it right, you can swap between Song of Flame and Transcendence virtually interchangeably with this build, and you'll constantly be amplified and you'll constantly have your arc buddy as well as the Bleak Watcher. So to no surprise to anyone, Getaway Artist makes a comeback here in one of my Warlock builds. It's just too good to stay away from too long. Dynamic Duo, convert your Arc Grenade into an Arc Soul. It's called a Sentient Soul on your screen. You become amplified. The Arc Soul functions as an autonomous turret. One of the hidden benefits to using this exotic armor is that if your Arc Soul, your Sentient Soul, gets kills, it will passively refund grenade energy. So to take advantage of this, because we're going to be constantly using our grenade to consume and spawn that Sentient Soul, we're going to make sure to only put on 1 energy cost mod. You can masterwork it and put on whatever you need. I just topped off the intellect so I get to T5. And here's something we're going to do that's different from other builds that I've run with this armor. We're going to put on 3 heavy-handeds. What I'm trying to do is be able to give you the most fastest yet functional Warlock you can be with some weapons that may not be considered meta right now. So the way that we're going to do that is every time we get a powered melee kill, whether that is with our Lightning Surge or our Arcane Needle, within 1 second, so you got a 1 second cooldown, I think everyone can wait just 1 second, you're going to spawn an Orb of Power. What that's going to do, it's going to double down on what we have already on our helmet. thereby giving us our super back much quicker. And oh, by the way, you've got 3 orbs of power to pick up at the same time. So theoretically, 3 orbs of power in 3.01 seconds, you can get all of your abilities back even quicker. Thereby, you can spam your melee. You can run Barrow Dyad, because every time you hit with your melee, you're going to be radiant, which means you're going to get unraveling rounds, because you're also going to pick up that orb of power. So a lot of different things to be able to give you shield and barrier piercing, as well as additional tick damage, which Barrow Dyad already has fantastic damage for the weapon type that it is. So we're just basically piling on top of all of those things. And if you cycle through your abilities, you're going to be doing all of this while you have your Arc Soul running by your side. For the chest armor, we're going to be going with whatever mod that you need for the buff that you need. We're going to go with 2 damage resistance mods. And one of the things that we're going to do is make sure we got our arc reserves on. Increase the amount of ammo you carry for arc weapons. Since we are running a special and a heavy arc weapon, having extra reserves is never a bad thing, because we are not running a heavy ammo finder perk on our helmet. So having a few extra rounds in our back pocket is going to be very beneficial. Our leg armor is going to further take advantage of that by having Arc Holster. Gradually reload your stowed arc weapons over time. Now, the reason I have this on here is because neither of those two weapons have reconstruction or auto loading holster on them. And given the fact that we're just going to be playing like a militant style gameplay with our Psycho Pump, which means we're going to pull it out, fire it, and then put it on our back and continue on with our Barrow Dyad. Having this holstered for a period of time is also going to load around into that grenade launcher. So it's like auto loading, but not quite the same thing, because you do have to wait a little bit of time. To compensate for our lack of extra ability regen, we're going to put on Absolution and, of course, Invigoration. Invigoration is going to give us our orbs of power from our melees back faster, which also means that we're going to be proccing Restoration. And Absolution, of course, is going to give us our abilities back even faster. If you build it like this, this comes out to 6 energy, which means you can put a 3 or 4 energy mod slot general armor mod here without hesitation. For our class item, it wouldn't be complete without putting on Reaper shortly after using your class ability. Your next weapon, Final Blow, spawns an Orb of Power. To complement this, we're going to go with Outreach to give us our melee back quicker, which means more Orbs of Power quicker. And Font of Restoration. The reason Font of Restoration makes sense here, not necessarily because we're using Phoenix Dive, we're just using our regular Healing Rift, but we're going to be able to proc our class ability more often, and our recovery is going to be boosted. So if you're outside of the Nether, you do still generate some health with your class ability. I just want to make that clear. It says on the screen that there is no health regen, but if you pop your Rift, it very, 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 very slowly regenerates if you stand there and watch it like I have a few times, just waiting for your health to get back to an acceptable level before you continue on to the next area. Make sure that you, if you've got an Artifice bond like what I've got, make sure that you masterwork it. You can also put on the Guardian Games Warlock bond, which here I'll show you this real quick. It is an Artifice armor. You can put on whatever you need to put on. If you don't have an Artifice bond, then make sure you masterwork your Bond of Contests, and you can get the same thing that you see in this Warlock bond right here. This is the one from the little side activities with Eris and the Bento coins, or Bento, whatever they were called, Bento coins, I think. So that's how I got this one. But the Guardian Games is a nice one to have. On the flip side, especially for those who never got an Artifice bond in the first place. For our artifact, it's going to be pretty straightforward. The most important thing here is to make sure that you have your overload machine gun on. The piercing sidearm is if you need to have the piercing sidearm. The anti-barrier is just because I kind of experimented with a sniper rifle earlier and decided against it, so that's kind of a throwaway selection. In the second column, you want to make sure to have overclock and load because you're going to be amplified constantly. And you want to have unraveling orbs because you are going to be running Barrow Dyad and you want the unraveling rounds. And if you boost this with your Tome of Want, the strand weapon deals increased damage to strand debuff targets, which should basically be extremely easy for you to proc since you are going to be generating so many orbs of power with your powered melee. In the third column, we're going to go with Hold the Line because I want the final blows to heal me. We're going to go with Dielectric because arc debuff targets are basically going to be a given. And we want Disruptor Spike because anything that can stun an overload can also exhaust targets. So we just went through the 2 arc weapons that can stun overloads now. Now we're going to take it a step further. Elemental Siphon is also going to be selected here. Weapon, final blows with kinetic weapon, or a weapon matching your equipped super generates an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super. The reason that I have this on is for those that want to run either Needle Storm or Storm Trance. I did experiment with both, and you do see an increase in the elemental pickups depending on which one that you want. So I'm having this on here as just kind of a coverall if you want to spec into specifically Strand and Arc and leave out Song of Flame. Your Elemental Siphon artifact perk will in fact pair with either. In the next column, we've got Flashover. When you gain maximum stacks of Bolt Charge, you become amplified. Yet another reason or yet another thing that will cause you to become amplified, but virtually you're going to be amplified all the time. So the reason we've got this selected is the lightning bolts deal more damage. Horde Shuttle, of course, we're going to put this on. Damaging unraveled targets with a weapon occasionally spawns a Threadling. And if you boost this with your Tome of Want, Threadlings sever targets that they damage. If you're not tracking on what that boost does, it basically creates any build that you have Strand in into a Swarmers build, even if you don't have Swarmers procced. So it's not exactly the same thing, but severing targets, yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So keep that in mind as well. Make sure you're constantly boosting and refreshing your Tome of Want. Last but not least, we're going to have Heavy Ordnance Regeneration. Ordinarily, I would have at least 2 in this column. However, given the play style that we have, we're not going to be hurting for Bolt Charge, so stunning a champ with Defibrillating Blast is not really going to do anything that we're not already doing for ourselves with our Psycho Pump. So Heavy Ordnance Regeneration gives us our grenade and melee regeneration and uptick for a short duration, and it also gives us damage resistance. So just another way to try to stay alive while not running Feed the Void. So that is my Prismatic Warlock Barrow Dyad all Nether weapon build. Now, this is mainly going to be seen as probably a fun build, but some of the things that we went through, and again, I understand that Act 3 is upon us. We don't know what's coming in the artifact as far as perks. Of course, Barrow Dyad is going to get all the extra catalysts in Act 3, so we're going to have that to figure out as well. There's a lot of things to consider as well as those perks on the Psycho Pump and the Watchful Eye that are going to be going away at the end of Act 3. But keep in mind, Act 3, if you were around for Season of the Wish, that was Bungie's longest season that I can remember. And of course, I'm not as full of brain cells as I once was back in my younger years, but I like to think that I have a good enough memory to know if there is anything remotely as close as Season of the Wish. This season is going to be a comparison to Season of the Wish, which is the reason why I'm even talking about it. Once Act 3 drops and you look at the countdown timer in the season pass, this season isn't supposed to end until summer. So even if it dropped literally today, or even a month from now, there would still be an additional month or 2 months, I should say, until the season would drop. So for the next 90 days, give or take a little bit, 100 days, let's just call it 100 days just because I don't have the exact number of days calculated in my head in this second. We're going to be running the Nether as well as Court of Blades and whatever else that comes in Act 3. We're going to be running that for basically another 100 days, at least according to the timeline that Bungie has set for us. So that means all of these things that we are currently built with right now are going to be valid for basically a third of a year. When you put it in perspective like that, now we're really getting into the nitty gritty of what some of these nether weapons can actually do. Now, can you take them into every GM? No. Can you take Barrow Dyad into every GM? No. Can you take this build into every GM? No. But what can you do with it? Well, you can generate a ton of health. You can generate a ton of orbs. You can generate virtually unlimited amplified. You can generate lightning bolts. You can generate bolt charge. You can do a lot of things for a non-meta build that a meta build can theoretically do. You don't have to have the greatest stats in the world to be able to take advantage of this build. You don't have to have any weapons that are hard to get theoretically. If you're doing, assuming that you're running the seasonal activities regularly. Barrow Dyad does have a little bit of grind to it, but these other 3 weapons are not hard to come by. So theoretically, if you're looking for a build that is, let's just say 98% as powerful as, your meta builds out there, this is that build that's going to do it. And not to mention, you see nothing but green and lightning on the screen at virtually all times. This build is not only extremely fun, it is also very powerful. Will it be a top meta build? As of right now, I'm going to say no. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be used in a meta type style environment. You're not going to be taking this into the Crucible. You're certainly not going to be taking this into Trials. You're not going to be taking this into certain GMs and certain expert and master sectors. But this thing can still compete. You can put out serious damage in the Court of Blades with this, for example. You can put out serious damage in the Guardian Games activities, the PvE activities. You can still put out serious damage to a boss in a Nightfall. So I don't think this build is going to be any less useful than your normal everyday builds that you have fun with. This just takes advantage of extra tick damage from Barrow Dyad, extra tick damage from Psychopomp, as well as the ability to generate bolt charge. So this is your Arc Titan barricade right here. And then this is going to be able to stun 2 different champs. So theoretically, you can take this into a lot of different activities that would be considered endgame or meta necessary and put up a pretty darn good fight. So, but anyways, we can debate about that in the comments. Certainly, you guys can debate me however you want. Hey Durf, this build is good, this build is bad. I don't know if I can use this in my favorite activities or my master raid runs or whatever. I get it. But hey, is it fun? Is it functional? Does it take advantage of new seasonal weapons or new, to this season weapons? Does it take advantage of a not hard to get exotic piece? Does it take advantage of Prismatic in its fullest? You get 6 fragments. I think this build is definitely more than just fun. I think it is 100% viable. When I was running the Nether the last time that I ran it before doing this video, I had 2 of the most least aggressive teammates that I could have asked for in that matchmaking activity. And I took out that Tormentor. It did take me a minute, obviously, given the weapons that I've got. But it didn't take me that long. You know what? I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the Tormentor battle here as my my build example. So I won't waste your time talking through the whole thing. I'm going to let you guys watch the build do what it's supposed to do, and watch. No one likes going up against one-on-one against Tormentors. It's not fun. So this build going one-on-one with the Tormentor, I think is a good demonstration for the build. I was going to do something else, but in talking through this right now, that's what I'm going to do. I'll give a little bit of speech right as it started, but you guys will see. All the different facets of this build are going to come to life against the Tormentor. So in the Nether. If you did find anything helpful with this video or even fun with this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Guardian out there that is looking for a fun yet functional Prismatic Warlock build that focuses heavily on the seasonal weapons as well as the artifact and takes advantage of course, another way that Getaway artists can help us and constantly being amplified, please consider sharing this video with them or send them my way. My goal is to help as many people as possible. As always, I will have a dim link in the description. I will have a Discord link in the description. I'll have a membership link in the description. And of course, I welcome all feedback, and I know that there's going to I hope that there's going to be plenty. I certainly enjoy engaging with you guys and bouncing ideas off of each other. So, all right, I'm going to switch over to the Tormentor battle. I'll do a little bit of yammering, but otherwise I'll let the build speak for itself, and you'll see virtually I'm by myself this entire battle. So here we go. We're loading up into the Tormentor battle. Now, I'm not going to talk the whole way through this, but you're going to get the gist of it. I'm going to pop my Sentient Soul. I'm going to roll with my Psychopomp, get some area tick damage, and then I'm going to reload it, make sure that I get as many of the adds in those area blasts as possible. And here we go. I'm just going to start whittling down the boss. You can see with just that little bit, you know, it's not like I'm doing a ton of damage, but you can see I'm not really sure what my what my teammates were doing in this. There was only one in this fight for basically the entire fight, and I couldn't tell you how many times he was actually firing at the enemies, I should say, or even the Tormentor. And you see I'm just going to town. I pop my Transcendence. I'm swapping between my weapons. I'm taking advantage of Jolt. You can see the projectiles from my Bleak Watcher turret. And most importantly, you can see that I'm generating tons of energy back for my super. And now that I'm almost at critical health, now I'm going to finally take some cover here. You can see I'm going to watch my health bar go up very slowly. I get impatient, so I keep going. And on and on and on. I'm spawning threadlings. I'm getting tangles. Again, not sure what my ally is doing, but it's all good because I've got this guy fully under control for the most part. So as long as you're swapping through your different abilities and you're swapping through your your weapons, you're going to be able to generate a pretty decent amount of damage. Now, it's not meta type damage, and certainly Song of Flame against a Tormentor is not the best option, because at any time you can come up and slam his weapon into the ground and stun me, and then my super is over. But it still does excellent tick damage. You saw the lightning bolts there because, of course, I'm amplified thanks to my Sentient Soul. So I'm getting my bolt charges with my abilities, and, on and on and on. So if you guys did find anything helpful with this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Guardian out there who is looking for an extremely fun all-nether weapon build centered around Barrow Dyad as well as Arc, and our love for Arc as Warlocks and Guardians in general, please send them my way. I want to help them. I want to help as many people as possible, and hopefully, you guys try out this build and have as much fun as I did using this, even in this little bit of a sweaty encounter. All right, guys, take care.